Hello everyone, my name is Korosh Erfani and I am a sociologist and the author of the book Infinitism. The Infinitism is a philosophical theory in which we try to establish this idea that everything is infinite and we can find the infinitude in everything, and not only finding, discovering, but also using and acting on the infinitude in order to change the substance of the different materials and then obtain as a result what we want. So that's the main idea of the infinitism. We can use this idea in different field of activity, including in the social framework, which means in society. We can change our individual or personal life thanks to that. And also we can change the material world, right? We can change the nature, we can change the universe, all different products in order to get something that is concretely desired by the human beings. So that's the main idea of the infinitism, right? I developed that in a book called, with this title, Infinitism, How to Make Infinity Your Philosophy for Life. And this book is available for those who are interested in Amazon, Amazon.com. You can order this book there and read it and see what are the details of this philosophical theory. Now, we said that in order to make the core idea of the infinitism a reality, we need effectively to have a theoretical basis. This theoretical basis is called Infinitylogy. Infinitylogy is the knowledge of infinity, right? The theoretical knowledge that we need for acting and intervening on the reality. So we said that the infinitylogy would be a discipline in which there are the interconnection of three different fields. It's a multidisciplinary activity: philosophy, sciences, and technologies. We need all of them to construct a theoretical framework in which we can effectively find the ways to discover, to detect, and to change the infinite process that is going on in the material world. So, in order to do so, we need a theoretical setting, theoretical framework for the infinitylogy, which means that we should know how we have to combine philosophy, science, and technology to arrive to what we want. So it's not something that had been elaborated or established by some people before. This is a new idea that there would be a discipline to take acquaintance, to take knowledge about the infinity, about how the infinity is acting inside of the structure of any product, any phenomena. So we said that we need a very good theoretical ground, to found our discipline, infinitylogy. And for that, we are looking for the different elements and components in such a way that we can establish that. So one of the sources are effectively the different books, for example, that are talking about how to approach the reality in a methodical way, right? So what kind of methodology we have to use in order to understand better the reality and to approach to what we call truth. We said that the difference between reality and truth is that the truth is the most objective version, the most objective comprehension of the reality. It is the less or the least touched, changed, altered version of the reality, the truth. So that's why we need really to have different approach, different angles to see this problematic of the methodology of the Infinitylogy in order to, construct it, in order to build the methodology of the Infinitylogy up. So, among the different books that we can take into consideration, we choose one that is very interesting for what we are doing. It's called Against Method, right? Against Method is a very known and famed book from the Austrian philosopher of science, Professor Paul Feyerabend, right? Paul Feyerabend is telling us in this book how it's good to use a method and how it's bad to use only the method, right? If we want really to summarize the idea. So we started to read this book, right? And we finished the introduction. We finished one part of the chapter 1, and we draw some conclusions, some points that can be interesting. Let's review once the points that we uphold up to now, and then we will continue with the lecture of the chapter 1. So these are the points that we got from this book so far. First, we should not be too tied to a specific philosophy or predefined methodology, right? We should be rather thinking about methodologies instead of a methodology. Too much specialization could make us miss some necessary point. The fourth point, scientific knowledge should be humanized or it could be highly deficient. Fifth point, it's necessary to be free in discovery of the complexity of reality if we don't want to restrain artificially ourselves, right? If we don't want to restrain, to limit ourselves artificially. We should not be afraid of putting aside the law and order methods that alienate us from an objective knowledge of the reality. The objective knowledge of the reality, and the most objective knowledge of the reality, is the truth, right? We said. A free-thinking way won't lead to any chaos, but to a better flexibility to discover the truth. Right? You remember that we said that some people are trying to, scare us about the, have too much flexibility in our methodological approach. Why? Because they said that it will lead us, it will end up to a chaos, anarchy. So we said that we should not be afraid. We should dare using different point of view. And for the last time, we got this point. The mind should be free to think whatever it wants without being worried about what will be the consequences, right? It could be very bad so-called bad consequences, but we should dare to do that. We should be free to think about that, right? And then the status quo is good only to change, not to be preserved. Because most of scientists are so, grasped by some ideas that they think that we cannot change that. These are the absolute truth, and any change in that will upside down everything. No, it's not true. If we should understand the status quo, is not to keep the status quo as it is or as is, but to change it, to, make it evolve into a better thing, into a better situation. And finally, the last point from our last lecture is the political interest could be interfering in a process that could be devoid of it to approach the reality at its best. We should know that in a lot of so-called scientific process, scientific undertakings, you have the intervention of, the different political forces, social forces, interest forces, in order to direct our scientific work toward this or that goal. We should be attentive about that, because otherwise our work, our process will be devoid, will be empty of what is necessary to touch the reality. All right, these are the points that we got from the lecture of the book in the introduction and a part of the chapter 1. Now we will continue our lecture with the following part of the chapter 1. That interest, you remember it was question of political maneuver at the end, the political interest. So that interest, forces, propaganda, and brainwashing techniques play a much greater role than is commonly believed in the growth of our knowledge and in the growth of science, can also be seen from an analysis of the relation between idea and action. So we should take into consideration all these aspects of the interest, propaganda, those who are trying to brainwash and presenting and putting forward some assertion as the absolute truth, for example. Why? Because not only on doing that we can understand better the mechanism of the growth of science, of the growth of our knowledge, but also because by doing that we can see that how and what kind of relation between idea and action is being founded, is being grounded. What kind of relation between idea and action. So it's often taken for granted that a clear and distinct understanding of new ideas precedes and should precede their formulation and their institutional expression. We think like that. We think that it's first we should get some new ideas about something, right? They should precede to what? To formulation and to institutional expression. Is it true? Let's see what Professor Feyerabend is telling us about that. First, we have an idea or a problem. Then we act. It means either we speak or we build or we destroy. So one of these could be considered as act. Speaking, building, or destroying, right? First an idea and then act. Yet, this is certainly not the way in which small children develop. Look, that's the main idea. That's the institutional idea, that first of all we have to get some concept, we should get some notion, and then based on this notion we will act. We will try to, for example, presenting it, speaking or building something or destroying something bad. This is what we do according to the institutional presentation of the scientific process, scientific methodology. Is it true or not? Now we have a counter model in order to compare with that, with this institutional process or institutional presentation, and see if it is reliable or not. So, this is certainly not the way in which small children develop. They use words, they combine them, they play with them until they grasp a meaning that has so far been beyond their reach. Look, it's very interesting. It's saying that the children are already using the words when they are expressing something. They are so-called speaking, talking, to their parents or surrounding individuals. They are using the words. They are combining the different words that they learn. They are playing with them. But do they know exactly what they are expressing, what they are talking about? Not really. Until at a given moment, after months or years having used some words, finally they grasp the meaning. They grasp the real meaning of the term. A meaning that had been absent so far, even when they were abundantly using these words. So, what does it mean, this process? What this process is showing us. And the initial playful activity is an essential prerequisite of the final act of understanding. You see, the period of time during which they were using the word without having a precise understanding of the meaning, without having a clear idea about the real meaning of the term, could be considered as a necessary stage of getting finally the good or the real meaning of the term. This is a prerequisite of the final act of understanding. You see? So, from a very rational point of view, there is no function for that period of action by the children where and when they are using the words, combining them, playing with them, without having an idea about what is exactly the sense of the term they are or terms they are using. But Professor Feyerabend is telling us that don't worry about this, don't dramatize that. It's not catastrophe. It is even necessary if you want to know how finally the children will get to the real meaning of the terms, of the words. So that's a prerequisite of the final act of understanding of these words by the children. So now, there is no reason why this mechanism should cease to function in the adult. So why we should think that once we are adult, we don't do that anymore. We don't use the words without having exactly what does it mean. Why we should think that the adults are not playing with words. No? We are doing that. We are combining them. We are, sometimes talking hours and hours about something without having a very precise idea until at the end, we get finally some ideas formulated and presented consistently and coherently. But if you say that, why you didn't say this very consistent and very coherent presentation in the last minutes of your presentation after speaking 1 or 2 hours, because it was impossible, simply because he or she couldn't have done this very formulated presentation just at the beginning. It was impossible, not only mentally, but I mean structurally, for the process of understanding and being able to formulate this understanding. It was impossible. And I understand that point very well, because what we are doing in this set of presentations, is exactly what he's talking about, because the points that I present you as the point that we got or we uphold from the book, these points, almost 12 points until now. If you ask me, could we start with that? My answer would be no, because I don't know. I don't have these points. I got them after having presented the different part of the text, the different reasoning and arguments of the text in front of camera, speaking, talking, and combining the ideas, combining the words, and at a given moment, you grasp the idea, you grasp the point, you grasp the highlighted, the implicitly highlighted point, and you get this point and you put there. For example, let me show you this formulation, that the status quo is good only to change, not to be preserved. You cannot find that in the book. It's not said like this in the book. And I didn't have any idea about the status quo before trying to develop a part of the chapter 1 of the book in the video number 11, where we talked about the status quo. We talked about how changing it would be hard for the science if it is shadowed, if it is influenced by the political or social interest, for example. And suddenly I got this point that finally the author, the Professor Feyerabend, is trying to give us this idea that if you want to know exactly what is the status quo, it's not to preserve that, to keep that, to defend that, but also to change it, to alter it, to modify that. So that's an example. That's an example of the subject that we are talking about, the children, and would be also valid and available and running for the adults. This is what we are doing here. And that's a live example of what Professor Feyerabend is telling us here. Now, we must expect, for example, that the idea of liberty could be made clear only by means of the very same actions which were supposed to create liberty. So if you want to have an idea about the liberty, you should get it in the action, right? In the actions that, or during the actions, that would be kind of opportunity to create liberty. Otherwise, that would be a very vague and cloudy idea about what is liberty exactly. So when you are going through that in order to make it a reality, make it an actuality in society, then you realize what is exactly the liberty. And that's why having an idea of liberty and creating liberty are in a dialectical relationship that creates this idea of a lot of ways could be used, in order to have a better understanding of a phenomenon. That's the main idea of the epistemological anarchism, right? So, creation of a thing. Look, creation of a thing and creation plus full understanding of corrected idea of the thing are very often parts of one and the same indivisible process and cannot be separated without bringing the process to a stop. So you want to create something, that's good, and at the same time you want to understand it, that's good too. So try to have both. Try to understand the paralleling character of the process in which you can do it. That's why he said that these are the part of one and the same indivisible process, which means that you cannot really artificially divide the process in two parts. One part, creation of idea or having an idea, and on the other hand, creation of the reality of that thing. No, these are interrelated. These are intertwined, right? And they are, both of parts are in a dialectical relationship, mutual relationship, bilateral relationship. And this is the idea. If you want to separate them, what you do, just you paralyze the process. You stop the process. The process is dynamic, and this dynamic can be detected, can be observed when you try to understand that creation of the thing and understanding of a thing are almost the same, are part of the same process. You see how interesting it is for what we want to do for the mythology of the Infinitylogy? So if you can understand the infinity, you can go also through the infinitude. So catching the reality, the material reality of the infinitude could be in the same process of understanding the infinity. And understanding the infinity could open the way to catch the infinitude and to, change it, to modify it, to use it, to alter it, to act on it, to go operationally upon the infinitude. You can do it when you are doing also the discovery of the infinity, theoretical, practical, theoretical, and how they pass each other the ball, and how they go hand to hand in order to give us an idea about how the Infinitylogy could be formulated, could be established as a discipline, could be set up as an operational theory. Now, look at this part that is very interesting. The process itself is not guided by a well-defined program. This is the idea of the those who advocate law and order methodology. The process is not like that. It's not guided by a well-defined program and cannot be guided by such a program. Not only it is not, but cannot be neither, right? For it contains the conditions for the realization of all possible programs. Why we cannot really have this process as too much guided, too strictly guided, because if you do so, you are losing the conditions that are necessary for the realization of any program, any possible program, whatever it is, your favorite or not, or others, right? So that's why as soon as you think that for arriving to the truth about a reality, there is no other ways but only one, you are losing completely the connotation of the process. You are losing the kind of reliability of the process. It's not reliable. It's not credible anymore. Why? Because you are taking off, you are removing a necessary substantial part of the process to succeed. Therefore, you cannot succeed. Therefore, you cannot reach the goal of your project. That's the idea. It would be impossible to insert, one single program if you close the door to any others. Doesn't work like that. That's why Professor Feyerabend is quoting something from the Danish philosopher Kierkegaard. Look how it is interesting. It's guided, the process of knowledge, the process of taking knowledge of something. It's guided rather by a vague urge, by a passion. The passion is quoted from the Danish philosopher Kierkegaard. Passion, So if you talk with those who are strictly bonded to the law and order methodology about passion in science, they will be afraid. They will alarm, about something highly no-scientific. It's impossible to intervene passion in the process that could produce the scientific knowledge. But it's not the case. We will see that, on the contrary, when you have this element of passion, a lot of interesting things can come about. Look, the passion gives rise to specific behavior, which in turn creates the circumstances and the ideas necessary for analyzing and explaining the process, for making it rational. Can you believe that? Can you believe that from the passion we are being led, to the rational? From passion we are pushing toward the rational. And this is what is happening. How? First, the passion produces the specific behavior. And then this specific behavior will create the circumstances and also will create the ideas that are necessary for analyzing and for explaining the process by which we want to get knowledge. And because we are analyzing, we are explaining, we are elaborating, we are reasoning, we get, the rational aspect of the thing. So that's why the process could become rational only and only if we analyze and explain. And we analyze and we explain why? Because we could get we could create some circumstances and ideas, right? And how we created that? Because we had a specific behavior. And what accounts for this specific behavior? The passion. The passion accounts for the specific behavior. The passion explains how we get the specific behavior, thanks to which we create circumstances and ideas, and thanks to them we can analyze, we can explain the process of knowledge, the scientific process, and then we can call it scientific process. Why? Because it's rational. And it's rational because all these processes, all these details, components, and combination and interrelation between them. This is how it is interesting to see there is not one way to get the scientific knowledge, but there are ways, right? Here we are. So the development of the Copernican point of view from Galileo to the 20th century is a perfect example of the situation I want to describe. Here, Professor Feyerabend starts to give us a very good example of how this process is running for the historical, concrete, scientific cases. We start with a strong belief that runs counter to contemporary reason and contemporary experience. That runs counter, against, right? What is established as the contemporary reason or contemporary experience. So, what is this? The belief spreads and finds support in other beliefs which are equally unreasonable, if not more so. Like what? Like law of inertia, like the telescope, for example. So you see one belief, the Copernican one, starts to give us some other ideas, some other beliefs. So the first belief that is not really confirmed, that is not complying with the established explanation, with the established reason, is not only itself a strange belief, right, unusual belief, but also it's creating other beliefs of this kind. Why? They are equally unreasonable. So what's the result? Research now gets deflected in new directions. Now that our curiosity is triggered, right? Now we can go toward the new direction. Why? Because our curiosity had been touched. Now we are curious about what's going on. Is it true? Is it not? And therefore, we try to reorient, redirect our research, right? So what we do, not only we go in the new direction of research, but also new kinds of instruments. We invent the new instruments in order to experience that, right? We need the new tools. So that's why we build these new instruments up in order to check that, to verify that. Evidence is related to theories in new ways until there arises an ideology, right? A new intellectual system. Ideology means that here. That is rich enough to provide independent arguments for any particular part of it, and mobile enough to find such arguments whenever they seem to be required. So you see that we have a very productive process that is triggered by a new idea, right? As soon as we have this new idea, this new belief that is going to the opposite direction of the dominant reasoning, the dominant model of reasoning, then we have a process that is triggered. A new process is setting off. How? First, we go toward the new direction of the research. We create and build the new instruments, right? We create the new tools, and then we get the evidence. And these evidence now are related to the theories that can be formulated, right? Can be described as a set of thought, a set of intellectual ideas, ideology we said, and then this system of ideology, this system of intellectual ideas is rich enough to give us some new arguments, right? Independent arguments. Independent arguments here means the arguments that are not depending on the dominant and established ideas before, right? It's something new. For any particular part of it, for any particular part of this ideology, for this intellectual setting, and also flexible enough, sufficiently flexible to find such arguments, the similar arguments, the necessary similar arguments, whenever they are needed. You see that we have effectively a process of production. We have something that could be as a stage by stage process. But this process itself, at the beginning, at the starting, had been triggered because we break the law, right? Because we go toward a counter model, because we didn't obey with the dominant system of explanation of a phenomenon. And because we wanted to see differently, we could effectively open a new horizon in which we can get the new argument, the new evidence, the new tools, the new system of explanation, a kind of ideology, which means a package of the ideas, right? And then in this package, we have any ideas that's necessary, and not only that, not only some ideas, but also the tools of production of ideas, which means that with this ideology, if we arrive to a new situation, we can mobilize our system, our intellectual system, our ideology, and arguments that are inside in order to produce an answer for this new situation, right? This is the particularity of the methodology, this is the operational methodology inside of a package that is producing the answer, the new answer for the ideology, for this system of thought. This is how it works. You see that we shouldn't be afraid about what's going on when there is a new idea, when there is a new approach. That's why Professor Feyerabend is telling us we can say today that Galileo was on the right track. That was not the case when Galileo suggested his ideas, right? But today we can say that. We can say that he was effectively on the good track, in the right track. Why? For his persistent pursuit of what once seemed to be a silly cosmology, to be a stupid cosmology. The idea that the Earth, considered at that time as a center of universe, is just one of the planets that are turning around the sun, right? That was silly idea. That was a very strange idea. But this silly cosmology has by now created the material needed to defend it against all those who will accept a view only if it is told in a certain way, and who will trust it only if it contains certain magical phrases called observational reports. You see, at the beginning, nobody wanted to believe in Galileo's idea. But because he persisted, he could he could launch a process with the particularities that we countered above. You know, creation of idea, tools, new research, arguments, new arguments, ideology, and so on. And now, thanks to all this process, those who want to defend the ideas or the theory of Galileo, the theory suggested by Galileo, have everything necessary to prove the credibility and the validity and the reliability of this idea. Tools like the telescopes, for example, theory, calculation, models, presentation, everything. And now it is possible to satisfy and to convince those who want for everything the observational reports, right? It's possible to do that. But it was not if Galileo didn't really persist in pursuing his silly, so-called silly cosmology. Because he persisted and because some other people followed what he said, now we have everything in our hand to prove that. And this is not an exception. It is the normal case. You see? Don't think that that's just an example, but it's not an exceptional example. It's a normal case. Why? Because theories become clear and reasonable only after incoherent parts of them have been used, applied, served for a long time. So that's why when we suggested this idea of the infinitism, we thought that there are a lot of ideas regarding the infinity, regarding the presence of the infinity, evasive presence of the infinity in everything. There are the ideas. There are those who are talking about the infinitude of the universe, space, time, structure of matter, microcosmos, macrocosmos, and cosmology, a lot of things. But we don't try to put them together in a coherent way. That's the idea of the Infinitylogy. That's the main idea of the theory of infinitism. That if we put together them, if we understand better the interrelation of them, how they can complete each other, how they can reinforce or embolden each other, at a given moment we can have a coherent idea, we can have a cohesive theoretical system that can explain how we can use effectively, not only know deeper and better the infinity in the universe, but also how we can use that, how we can apply our knowledge on this process, on this infinite process, in order to change what is a finite entity, right? A finite entity in which there is an infinite process. So you see, there are effectively these these incoherent parts that are going on and that are used for a long time regarding the Infinitylogy, but nobody is using them as a coherent system, as a coherent entity. This is what we want to do in the Infinitylogy and in the infinitism. Right? All right. Just the last sentence for this presentation. Such unreasonable, nonsensical, unmethodical foreplay thus turns out to be unavoidable precondition of clarity and of empirical success. So you see, all the things that could look unreasonable, we always try to avoid unreasonable, right? Nonsensical. Who is advocating a nonsensical thing? Unmethodical. Which scientific can say that I am aware of the unmethodical aspect of my work, but I want to integrate it. I want to consider it as a necessary part. Nobody, right? But we should know that all of these are somehow an unavoidable precondition. Unavoidable. Which means that we have to comply. We must comply with this, reality of the existence and the presence of all these unreasonable, nonsensical, unmethodical aspects as a precondition of clarity and also of empirical success. So, which means that we should somehow revolutionize, our view. How we can revolutionize? We can start to believe in the necessity of having some part of, some kind of unreasonable, unmethodical, nonsensical part in what we are doing. Like the main idea of the infinitism. When we say that you can get everything you want and as much as you want thanks to your intelligent, targeted intervention on the infinite process of the structure of matter, it looks like, wow, it's nonsensical, right? Or it looks like maybe at the beginning or at, the starting point, unmethodical, unreasonable. But once we are in this mindset that even though we believe on the unreasonable character of what we say, nonsensical character of this assertion of the infinitism, then we will have a chance to effectively get the clarity and the empirical success of the idea. And from that moment, you see that we don't need to up our guard, toward the new ideas, revolutionary idea, anarchical idea like this one. That, wow, in everything we can find the infinite process, and then we can change and alter this process in such a way that we can get what we want? Is it possible? So you see that at least if it is possible, there is a way to check that, to verify that. And for this, we should be able to understand the necessary presence of the unreasonable, nonsensical, and unmethodical components, ways, assertion, thoughts, suggestion, proposals, in order to get the clarity on the subject. And also, if we can check it empirically, by experience. We will see. We will continue this text next time, and I think in the next presentation we will finish the chapter 1 of the book Against Method from the Professor Paul Feyerabend, and then we try to summarize the chapter 1 in order to go to the chapter 2 to see what could be as interesting idea of the following chapters. Thank you very much for watching this video.